Subscribe to the Prepper Historian right now if you value serious, well-researched military history and real survival knowledge, because what we're about to break down is one of the most quietly effective field survival practices of the Second World War. This is not a myth, not propaganda, and not romanticized battlefield folklore. It's a documented, practical system German soldiers relied on to stay alive in environments that killed unprepared men in days. Many modern survivalists unknowingly reinvent parts of it, yet few understand how complete and deliberate the original method really was. When people talk about German WWII survival, they usually focus on weapons or discipline. What rarely gets discussed is how German infantry were trained to turn their own bodies, clothing and surroundings into a self-sustaining survival system. This trick wasn't a single gadget or secret item. It was a doctrine-level approach to heat retention, calorie preservation and energy management that allowed soldiers to endure cold, hunger and exposure far longer than their enemies expected. The survival trick began with controlled heat conservation, not fire. German field manuals emphasized something most armies underestimated early in the war. Fire gives warmth, but it also gives away position and wastes calories. Instead of immediately building fires, soldiers were trained to trap body heat using layered wool uniforms, wind-blocking outer shells and deliberate posture control. A German soldier in winter conditions was taught to minimize exposed skin, reduce unnecessary movement and use terrain to block wind before ever thinking about ignition. In practical terms, this meant sitting against earth banks, shell craters, tree roots or snow walls rather than pacing or stamping feet, which burns calories and accelerates heat loss. For modern survivalists, this translates directly. Before lighting a fire, ask whether your clothing system and positioning are already doing half the job. Wind kills heat faster than cold. A simple windbreak, even improvised from packs or terrain, can preserve more warmth than a small fire ever will. Food discipline was treated as a survival weapon, not comfort. German soldiers were drilled to eat strategically, not emotionally. Rations were consumed based on workload and exposure, not hunger alone. High-fat foods were prioritized before rest or sleep, because, well, fat digestion produces longer-lasting internal heat. Soldiers were explicitly warned against eating heavy meals during long marches, as digestion competes with muscle output and accelerates exhaustion. This wasn't guesswork. It was physiological awareness taught at unit level. You can apply this today by timing calorie intake around rest and shelter phases, not just activity. In cold environments, saving dense calories for evening can dramatically improve overnight survivability. Many modern hikers fail not because they lack food, but because, they eat it at the wrong time. Shelter was built to disappear, not impress. One of the most shocking aspects of German field survival was how minimal their shelters were. Instead of tents, soldiers relied on low-profile, body-sized earth shelters using ponchos, shelter halves, or natural depressions. The goal wasn't comfort, it was thermal efficiency and concealment. Smaller spaces heat faster, lose less warmth, and reduce exposure. Soldiers were taught to dig shallow scrapes, line them with pine boughs or straw, and seal airflow at ground level. This principle remains brutally effective. A compact shelter that fits your body closely will outperform a larger, poorly sealed one every time. In modern terms, a bivvy combined with terrain use often beats elaborate tarp setups when cold and wind are the primary threats. Moisture management was treated as life or death. German doctrine emphasized staying dry above all else. Soldiers were trained to vent clothing during movement and seal it during rest. Sweating was considered dangerous, not unavoidable. Wet wool still insulates, but drying it cost time and calories soldiers often didn't have. Field routines included changing socks whenever possible and sleeping with damp items against the body to dry them slowly using body heat rather than external fires. This is directly applicable today. If you overheat while moving, open layers early. If clothing gets damp, dry it using controlled body heat instead of open flames whenever stealth or fuel is limited. Energy preservation was enforced through discipline, not motivation. Perhaps the most overlooked part of this survival trick was enforced rest. German units rotated labour whenever possible, even during retreats. Standing still, lying down, or leaning into terrain was encouraged whenever pauses occurred. Soldiers were taught that unnecessary movement was the fastest way to die from exposure. In modern survival situations, people panic and, move too much. The German approach reminds us that survival is often about doing less, not more. Once shelter, insulation and positioning are handled, stillness actually becomes an asset. Why does this matter today, and why do historians still study it? This survival system wasn't glamorous, but it worked across Eastern Front winters, alpine conditions, and prolonged campaigns. It combined physiology, terrain use, and discipline into a repeatable method. Modern militaries and survival instructors quietly teach variations of these same principles, often without crediting their origins. If you strip away ideology and focus on fieldcraft, this is, honestly, one of the most transferable survival frameworks ever used at scale. It doesn't rely on technology, expensive gear, or ideal conditions. It relies on understanding the human body under stress and respecting environmental physics. If you found value in this breakdown, subscribe to The Prepper Historian, share this with someone who takes history and survival seriously, and keep these lessons alive. The past still has a lot to teach those willing to study it properly.